If the relative frequency of school shootings in the United States weren't disturbing enough, it has become painfully predictable that in the wake of such tragedies, people will insist that the simple solution to school shootings is to train and arm teachers in the interest of defending our children. I realize that people are making that argument because they truly believe it will help keep children safe and reduce school shootings. If you're in that boat, perhaps I can give you some perspective that will allow you to make a more informed decision on this issue. One problem that we have when dealing with educational issues is that people think a diploma grants them sufficient expertise in how schools operate and what teachers do, even though a former student's perspective is extremely limited compared to that of teachers or administrators. Also, even if you were 18 when you graduated, your brain still had another 6 to 8 years to go before it was fully developed, meaning that even your perception of high school is skewed from what an objective adult observer would see and remember, let alone your primary school years. A simple example of this problem is how most people assume that teachers work something like an 8 o'clock to 3 o'clock job with summer, spring break, and winter break off. They assume the only time teachers are working is when students are in the classroom, ignoring the hours of work before and after the school day, the weekends many of us spend grading and providing feedback on student work, and the weeks of work before and after the school year. Most adults don't remember their teachers working in the summer because as students, they had the whole summer off. Therefore, they still believe that teachers spend 3 months of summer vacationing. Unfortunately, this plea for arming teachers seems rooted in equal ignorance. That's not to say that there are no teachers out there who would be in favor of being armed, but let me give some reasons why this one thinks it's a bad idea. Let us begin to consider the concept of training teachers in firearm use and counterterrorism measures. I'm going to grant the advocates for this the benefit of the doubt that they are only proposing this for the able-bodied and willing teachers who volunteer for the responsibility of possessing firearms for these purposes. The problems of entrusting a firearm to someone who may be a great geometry teacher but is physically incapable of lifting a loaded gun or deeply philosophically opposed to shooting someone seems self-evident. Training other teachers is part of my job. I've led multiple sessions of different types of teacher training and professional development. I can assure you that it's not a simple task, and teachers need regular training in pedagogy that dominates their required professional development time already. Likewise, training professional police officers in firearm proficiency is so difficult that it pretty much doesn't happen effectively. I'll link below to a great article on the numerous issues that have led our police to not being well-trained firearms experts, and how with regularity they kill or injure innocents around their target when they do need to use deadly force. It turns out that real life isn't like an action movie where good guys can shoot live targets who are shooting back at them with 95% accuracy, and the bad guys have 2% accuracy. Being a skilled and competent shooter takes a lot of time and consistent ongoing practice with expensive materials like live ammunition. If it's too difficult and expensive to train our police who are sent out into the line of duty with a firearm every day, how on earth would we effectively tack on sufficient firearms training to the already demanding professional development of our teachers, especially if you expect them to be able to execute those sort of things in live situations without significant collateral damage? Speaking of the cost of training, let's think about the raw cost of investment here. Handguns are not cheap. Among the cheapest I could find online was this 9mm Luger for $235. The standard Glock 22, a favorite of law enforcement, is about $300. So let's imagine that schools are getting a discount weapons contract and they can get each handgun for a reduced price of like $200. I work in a pretty average-sized high school with about 90 teachers. Let's say 20% of those teachers are actually willing to be armed and trained. Mind you, that's about a $4,000 price tag just to put a gun in 22% of teachers' hands. That doesn't count the high cost of dollars and time needed for the training nor the cost of ammunition. For perspective, our school only has 2 automated external defibrillators, costing a total of $3,000. AEDs are emergency equipment proven to save lives and the much higher likelihood of someone's heart stopping compared to that of a school shooting. Yet people want to invest thousands of more dollars into providing teachers with firearms, even though police use of deadly force often results in innocent civilian casualties who they had no intentions of shooting. Again, check out that article in the description. It's really difficult to justify dumping that kind of investment into schools across the board when it's already more than what we put into just emergency equipment, and when so many of them are already deprived of infrastructure, learning materials, or a number of educators that they deserve to have due to a lack of funding available. On a partially related note, there's something of an unwritten rule among teachers not to bring anything into the classroom that you aren't willing to have broken or stolen. Even if a gun is securely locked away in theory, you've increased the likelihood for kids to get their hands on a firearm by bringing one into the school, and you've compounded that likelihood for every teacher in the building who has one. That is even further compounded for every school that implements such a policy. Combinations get broken, keys get misplaced or left in drawers, or any number of things. Accidents happen, and things get stolen or messed with when you're dealing with a high volume of kids who move through a school building or even in a secondary classroom each day. It's bad enough that it means an occasional broken or stolen laptop or tablet that has been locked up. But the consequences are a lot more serious when a firearm gets misplaced or tampered with. Not all teachers are in the same rooms all day. I would prefer that mistakes made by teachers or by the system itself causing them not result in student fatalities in the interest of a fantasy that teachers having guns will make their students safer in the event of school shootings. When they talk about arming teachers, people seem to get this image of all students standing back in an orderly fashion while the teacher calmly and confidently shoots the intruder in the doorway, or when the teacher courageously walks into the hallway and hunts down the terrorist John McClane style. Meanwhile, back here in reality, it's already a lot to ask just for teachers to maintain any semblance of order at all during a crisis situation. The safest procedure in most schools is for teachers to lock doors while students in some way hide as quietly as possible away from those doors and windows while security and local police do their jobs. Just doing that is extremely difficult. If you don't understand that, just let a bumblebee or a spider loose in a high school classroom and see how difficult it is to maintain order, let alone during an active shooter crisis. Now you want a teacher to keep 20 to 30, sometimes 40 panicking children or teenagers safe while holding a loaded gun? Additionally, the professional emergency responders now have to enter a school and find and neutralize someone with a gun while you have teachers walking around or standing in their classrooms with guns out? It's one of those things that can only really look good on paper, and even then, not if you look at it for too long.